Hey guys, tonight we journey somewhere hot, dry, and sandy. No, not your last disappointing beach vacation. You're stepping into ancient Egypt, where the sun blazes like an unpaid electric bill, sand gets everywhere, and daily survival depends on how well you can chew stale bread and swat flies. The Nile glitters nearby, deceptively calm, until you remember the crocodiles and hippos that treat swimmers like surprise snacks. Dust coats your ankles. Flies trace lazy loops around your head. You tug your linen tunic, which is already clinging to your sweaty back. And don't look now, but the bread in your satchel? It's hard enough to qualify as a building material. Welcome to the land of pyramids where the architecture is divine, but your lunch tastes like dry regret. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you're listening. Always fun to see where in the world we're all falling asleep together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along the edge of a dusty village. The sun is merciless, pinning everything to the earth with a heat that simmers your thoughts. Around you, the homes are made from mud brick, sun-baked and slightly melting at the edges. There's no shade, unless you count the skinny palm tree that seems to sigh in the breeze like it's over this heat too. And then there's the smell. It's not bad, exactly, just ancient. Like onions left in a linen pouch too long, mixed with smoky fires and fermented things no one wants to name. You're not a pharaoh. You're not even a priest. You're a regular villager, which means you work a lot and eat, well, let's just say edible is a strong word. Your main diet? Bread. Lots of it. But not the fluffy kind that makes sandwiches. No, this is flat, dense, tooth-breaking stuff made from emmer, wheat, and barley. Sometimes it's so gritty from sand and crushed pottery that chewing it feels like dental combat. Historians still argue whether this dental damage was intentional, some ancient cleansing idea, or just poor milling. Either way, your molars didn't sign up for this. The beer is a little better. Sort of. It's not bubbly or cold or served in a glass with a lime wedge. It's thick, murky, and full of floating bread chunks. You drink it because water can kill you. Thanks to upstream pollution and lack of filtration, Nile water is basically a parasite pool party. The beer is fermented, mildly alcoholic, and weirdly, your safest hydration option. And let's talk about that bread again. It's not just rough on your mouth. It's also your currency. You pay taxes in bread. You get wages in bread. Bread might even be your offering to the gods. So every bite is a little bit sacred, even if it feels like you're chewing on gravel. As you walk past the fields, you see workers hunched over, scything barley while muttering under their breath. That barley will become beer and bread. And that's your diet, 6 days a week. If it's a feast day, add onions. Maybe a dried fish? It's the ancient version of pizza night. And yes, you are already disappointed, but you make do. Everyone does. You've got a small clay oven at home, a grinding stone that wears down your back faster than the flour you're making, and some clay jars for storage. You cook outside most days, because the inside of your home turns into a bread oven by noon. One neighbor waves at you from their rooftop. They're spreading out fish to dry in the sun, standard practice, even though the smell could clear a room faster than a priest with a plague warning. There's no refrigeration, of course. You store things in jars buried in cool sand, or you hang them in baskets under the eaves, hoping the rats and cats don't hold a dinner party while you sleep. And don't forget the bugs. You're constantly slapping flies, picking weevils out of your flour, and pretending you didn't just bite into something crunchy that wasn't grain. Still, there's a rhythm to it. A dusty, repetitive, slightly crunchy rhythm. Your stomach rumbles as you round the corner toward the bakery district, if you can call it that. It's more like 3 families who all own ovens and scream at each other about who gets to bake when. Smoke curls up from a chimney hole, and the scent of baking bread fills the air. Earthy, sour, and oddly comforting. The baker's son is hammering cracked pottery into smaller bits to add to the flour, a trick to help the grinding stone do its job. You wonder if he knows he's preparing your next chipped molar. Despite the daily monotony, you look forward to these small routines. You chat with the miller about the rising of the Nile, which determines next season's harvest. You nod solemnly when someone mentions that the gods are angry, again. Probably because someone forgot to leave beer at the temple. You chew your bread slowly, not just to avoid choking, but because it's filling. And it sits in your stomach like a stowaway. And if you're lucky, your neighbor might trade you a pickled radish or a fig that hasn't fermented itself into jam. These are wins. Small ones. After all, you're not living for luxury. You're living for routine, for the Nile's seasonal rhythm, for a slightly less sandy bite of bread tomorrow. You lie down that evening on your reed mat, belly full of barley and regret, and fall asleep to the hum of insects and the faint, far-off sound of someone vomiting from spoiled beer. Just another day in paradise. You wake up to the soft glow of early sunlight creeping through the slats of your mud brick house. It's not even hot yet, just warm enough to make your back stick slightly to your linen sheet. You stretch, rub the grit from your eyes, and contemplate the one pressing question that shapes your entire ancient Egyptian life. What kind of grain will you eat today? There are two main answers: emmer wheat or barley. Always. Forever. The two sacred grains that feed Egypt, fuel its labor force, pay its taxes, and make up the bulk of its religious offerings. If ancient Egypt had a food pyramid, it would just be a pyramid of grain. Literally and figuratively. You trudge out toward the central granary, where your day begins. You're here to grind, measure, and prep your rations. These rations don't come in neat bags or cheerful boxes. They come in baskets, wrapped in palm fronds and infested with the occasional weevil. You scoop a handful. The barley is dry and sharp, rough against your palms. Emmer wheat, on the other hand, looks a little more regal. Taller husks, a bit more golden. But it's a pain to thresh. So much chaff, so much work. You already hear your grinding stone laughing at your pain. The millstones are heavy and circular, sitting low to the ground. You kneel, place the grain on the stone, and push a top stone across it in a repetitive back-and-forth motion. Over and over. This, right here, is why you don't have abs of steel. You've got knees of sand. And blisters. And a permanently sore back. Historians still argue whether women did most of the grinding, or if it was shared more communally in village bakeries. Either way, you're doing it now, and it's just as miserable as it sounds. You add a little water to your coarsely ground flour. Very little, because clean water is scarce and sacred. A splash of beer might even go in if you're fancy. You knead it into a paste that smells like earth and old dreams, pat it flat with your palm, and bake it on a heated stone or inside a crude clay oven. And congratulations, you've made a basic loaf of ancient bread. It's probably already full of sand and tiny chips of rock from your millstone. It will be hard, dense, and oddly tangy from wild yeast. You'll chew each bite like it owes you money. But there's more than one way to grain your sorrow. Some days, you make porridge. The grains are boiled into a sticky mush that cools into a block, often left overnight to congeal. It's the kind of thing that makes you nostalgic for flavor. On really good days, festival days, offerings to the gods days, you might get a hint of spice. Maybe coriander or fenugreek, which someone smuggled from the temple gardens. Maybe a smear of honey if someone in your family is connected to a beekeeper. Maybe, and this is the dream, a date mashed into the dough before baking. You munch on your bread meets brick breakfast and look around at your village. Everyone's chewing, no one's talking. Because chewing ancient Egyptian bread takes a lot of concentration. And let's not forget the bonus hazard. Ergot, a mold that grows on grain and can cause hallucinations, muscle spasms, and, death. Historians still debate whether ancient Egyptians suffered widespread ergot poisoning during wet years, or if their grain-drying methods saved them. Either way, your bread comes with a side of risk. Lunch? More of the same. Maybe broken bread soaked in beer, maybe barley porridge again. If you're lucky, a few green lentils from the market. If you're really lucky, your cousin didn't eat all the leeks you were saving. Still, your body adapts. Ancient Egyptian villagers are lean, muscled, and constantly walking. You're either farming, hauling, baking, or brewing. You burn more calories than you eat, but that's just the way it is. You don't worry about dieting. You worry about floods. A good Nile flood means more grain. A bad one means famine. Entire dynasties rise and fall based on how high the water climbs along the banks. There's a calendar painted on your neighbor's wall, Months marked not by names but by flood phases. It tells you when to plant, when to harvest, and when to panic. And grain isn't just food, it's currency. You pay taxes in it. You offer it to the gods. You store it in granaries shaped like beehives, guarded by scribes who look very smug with their ink and their math. One of them strolls by now, his linen robe annoyingly clean, his stylus tucked behind his ear. He doesn't have calluses on his hands. He has numbers. And numbers, in this world, rule everything. He stops, eyes your grain basket, and makes a small mark on his papyrus scroll. You sigh. That mark? That's your tax. You go back to grinding. The sun climbs. Your sweat soaks the edge of your tunic. The grain clings to your fingers, and still you grind. Because if you don't, no bread. And no bread means no energy to keep grinding. It's the circle of strife. Evenings offer a moment of peace. You sit with others around the fire pit, each with a hunk of something brown and edible-ish. Someone tells a story about a scribe who ate too much barley and passed out in a granary. You laugh politely, though your jaw still aches. The stars blink above you, soft and distant. You fall asleep again thinking of bread. Always bread. Just one more day in the land of wheat and wishes. The next morning, you wake to the sound of bubbling. Not from a luxurious bath, no one in your village has that kind of luck, but from the beer vat in your neighbor's courtyard. Beer is, quite literally, everywhere. You smell it before you see it. Yeasty, sour, with a tinge of something that might have once been barley and now has dreams of vinegar. It's morning. Time for breakfast. And yes, you're drinking beer. Again. But don't imagine a cold pint with froth and a citrusy finish. This is ancient Egyptian beer. Think thick. Think porridge. Think chunks of bread floating in a murky sludge you slurp from a ceramic bowl. You raise the bowl to your lips, grimacing slightly. It's gritty, warm, and vaguely sour, like someone made soup from yeast and forgot to add the flavor. Still, it's your best option. Water is out of the question, unless you want your intestines to perform interpretive dance for the next 3 days. Nile water? Full of animal waste, sewage runoff, and bacteria your body has no chance against. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians actually enjoyed their beer or just tolerated it as the only drink that wouldn't kill them. The evidence leans toward yes. They liked it enough to bury people with jugs of it and to offer it to gods in temple ceremonies. You finish your first bowl, feeling that light buzz begin, not because it's strong, but because your stomach is mostly empty. The alcohol content is mild, probably around 2 to 4%, but you've had nothing else since the sun came up. As you walk down the narrow village path, you pass a priest carrying a clay jug with a reed stopper. He nods solemnly. That jug? Full of beer, too. In fact, some temples brewed their own supply. The gods apparently are big fans of fermentation. And beer isn't just for adults. Even kids drink it. Not to get drunk, but because, again, water equals danger. It's like giving your child warm soup in the morning. If that soup made them burp and slightly tipsy by noon. You remember once hearing that the goddess Hathor, the deity of joy and music, once saved the world by getting drunk. She was on a rampage and about to destroy humanity, but the gods tricked her by dyeing beer red and pouring it over the fields. She drank it all, got giggly, and forgot her murderous plans. A divine hangover saved your ancestors. Good times. You reach the brewery, the community one, where multiple families share fermentation pits. The scene is chaotic. Women stir open-topped vats with big wooden paddles. Kids throw bread into barrels. An old man is fishing weevils out of a batch with 2 fingers and a deeply concentrated frown. The basic method? Bake loaves of half-cooked barley bread, then crumble them into a vat of warm water. Let it all sit. Add wild yeast if you're lucky enough to find some. Wait, then strain it, if you bother, with a reed mat to remove the worst of the lumps. Some people add dates to sweeten it. Others, more daring, add herbs or spices. Once, your aunt put coriander in hers and got compliments for a week. Beer making is also social currency. A good batch can win you favors. And if you work on the government's grain supply line, congratulations, you might get access to official beer. Slightly better, less chunky, probably blessed by a temple scribe who's never even tasted it. Beer is also medicine, or so people say. Headache? Beer. Back pain? Beer. Spirit possession? Beer, and maybe a little ritual chanting. By midday, you're lightheaded from a second round, and it's not just the alcohol, it's the heat. The beer sits heavy in your belly, but you're too dehydrated to care. You sit under a papyrus awning watching your cousin argue with a neighbor about whose beer spilled on whose goat. The goat is chewing someone's tunic, indifferent. The flies are relentless today, swirling in clouds like gossip in a marketplace. You swat them away and sip your third bowl slowly. A warm breeze carries the smell of sour mash across the village. Your grandmother used to say that beer is the gift of the gods, but you're starting to think it might just be ancient Egypt's version of filtered regret. Still, you're thankful. You'd rather drink this odd, chunky potion than risk dysentery. Or worse. The guy who drank Nile water last week still hasn't gotten out of bed. You watch as one of the temple workers carries a small jug toward the mortuary priest's home. It's an offering, beer for the dead. Because even in death, no one escapes the brew. There's a strange comfort in the ritual of it all. The brewing, the pouring, the shared buzz. Beer as food, drink, prayer, and survival rolled into one warm, sludgy bowl. By evening, the brewery quiets down. The fires die out. The leftover mash is fed to animals, or made into tomorrow's bread. You lie down again on your reed mat, the memory of beer coating your tongue like a fuzzy blanket. Your belly gurgles. You hope it's just fermentation, not revenge. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Because in ancient Egypt, beer isn't a drink. It's a way of life. You wake before the sun fully rises, and for once, it's not the beer gurgling in your stomach or the flies performing aerial acrobatics above your face that pulls you from sleep. It's your jaw. Specifically, the dull ache from grinding yesterday's bread into a texture resembling sandpaper. You sit up slowly, groaning as your muscles protest. Outside, smoke curls lazily into the air from the bakery next door. The smell is toasty, but in that way that makes you suspect something is slightly burning. Your breakfast today? Bread. Again. But this time, let's talk about why that bread feels like chewing a dried brick with a surprise inside. The process of bread making in ancient Egypt is simple and brutal. First, you grind the grain. If you're lucky, you have a quernstone that's only slightly older than time itself. You press the grain against the lower stone using another heavy rock, grinding it back and forth with your whole upper body until you feel like your arms have aged a decade. But it's not just the grain you're grinding, it's the stone itself. Tiny flakes chip off the grinding surfaces and mix into the flour. You don't see it until your next dental checkup, which, spoiler alert, is just you yanking out molars with a bone pick. Historians have found skeletons from this era with teeth worn down almost flat, evidence that ancient bread was basically edible grit. Some skulls even show abscesses and jaw infections. So yes, your teeth are on borrowed time. You walk to your neighbor's baking hut, where two women are patting dough into discs. The dough is thick, heavy, and smells faintly sour, thanks to the wild yeast they've been cultivating in a cracked jar that's seen better centuries. They press the dough against the inside walls of a clay oven that resembles an upturned pot-bellied stove. The fire burns at the base, and the heat radiates through the inner dome. It's efficient, kind of, but also wildly inconsistent. Some loaves burn, some undercook, and some come out with the perfect crust, hiding a soft center that quickly turns rock hard in the heat. One of the women pulls a loaf from the oven with a charred stick, blows on it, and taps the bottom. It sounds like knocking on a tomb door. That means it's done. You get a piece, still warm, still gritty. You bite into it carefully, tongue already searching for stones. Yep, there it is. A delightful crunch that shouldn't be there. Sometimes, to bulk up the flour, people add crushed ceramic, either intentionally or as a result of poorly cleaned tools. So you might be eating ancient dishware without realizing it. But that's not the only thing hiding in your loaf. Bugs love grain, and you don't have sealed storage bins or clean silos. Weevils, ants, even the occasional beetle find their way in during grinding or mixing. Most are baked in. You pretend not to notice. You chew and chew and chew. It's the kind of experience that makes you grateful for every smooth bite you've ever had in your modern life. Still, bread isn't just food. It's life. It's sacred. Every household has a favorite loaf shape. Triangle loaves, round ones, long rolls. Some are stamped with marks to indicate they're temple offerings. There's even a kind of ancient Egyptian sourdough, fermented for days, shaped into special molds, and left to rise under linen cloths weighed down with stones. When it's finally baked, The aroma is sharp, tangy, and actually not bad. But even the best bread can't escape the sand. Sand is everywhere. It's in the air, in your hair, under your nails, and definitely in your dough. No matter how clean you try to be, it sneaks in. Some researchers argue that Egyptians simply accepted this as part of life, chewing sand as casually as they would chew papyrus to clean their teeth. Others say they tried to avoid it and just failed, over and over. Meanwhile, the children around you gnaw on smaller loaves. There's no children's menu, just smaller portions of the same crusty fare. You wince as a toddler cracks something hard and then giggles. Probably a beetle. Probably protein. You take a break, wandering toward the edge of the village, where someone is baking over a flat stone slab. This method avoids the ceramic shards, but still doesn't solve the sand problem. The wind shifts, and your face is instantly peppered with grit. It's exfoliating at least. Still chewing your last piece, you glance at the nearby Nile. It shimmers in the morning light, deceptively peaceful. Women kneel at the shore, rinsing pots and washing vegetables. A fisherman shouts as he yanks a slippery catch from his net, a rare treat. You wonder if he'll salt it, dry it, or just trade it for more bread. Back at the bakery, someone has managed to burn an entire batch. A column of black smoke rises into the sky. The baker waves it away with a reed fan and shrugs. Still better than the pharaoh's taxes, he jokes. You nod. You'd rather eat burnt bread than pay in grain. By late afternoon, you've eaten 3 small loaves, 2 of which tasted suspiciously like last week's batch. Your jaw feels loose in its sockets, your teeth are tired, and your stomach is working overtime to digest what may as well be pebbles wrapped in dough. And yet, you're grateful. This is survival food. The Nile gives, the sun bakes, and you chew. Day after sandy day. You lie down again, belly full of ancient gluten, wondering if tomorrow's loaf might be just a little less crunchy. You're back in the fields again today, following a trail of onion skins like breadcrumbs across the village. And no, you're not making soup, you're chasing your wages. See, in ancient Egypt, onions aren't just food, they're everything. You get paid in them, you offer them to the gods, you might even use them to settle a personal debt. One neighbor once gave up his best goat for a basket of particularly fat, fragrant onions. Regret still lives in his eyes. This morning, the market smells like it's been crying. Pungent and sharp, the odor of onions fills the air, drifting from carts, baskets, and clay bowls stacked high with white and red bulbs. You cradle your payment from yesterday's barley haul. 12 onions and a slightly squashed head of garlic. That's a good day. And let's not downplay it. Onions are valuable. They're easy to grow, store well, and don't spoil too quickly in the heat. They're strong enough to mask the taste of meat gone a little. Adventurous and mild enough to eat raw with your bread. You bite into one now, not unlike an apple, and your eyes immediately water. This is normal. Everyone's eyes water. The baker's eyes are constantly red, the brewer's tear up over his barrels, and the scribe, well, he probably cries about taxes, but we don't count him. Historians still argue whether the ancient Egyptians believed onions had magical properties, or if they just respected them as hardy, life-sustaining bulbs. Either way, these little spheres were buried with the dead, left as offerings in temples, and even carved into amulets. You pass a temple wall with a faded carving of a priest holding up an onion like it's the sun. Around it, rows of worshippers kneel. That's not a metaphor. That's onion-based devotion. Onions were thought to symbolize eternal life, their concentric rings echoing the layers of existence. You remember your cousin's funeral. His body was buried with garlic cloves on his chest and a string of onions tied around his neck. The priest mumbled something about spiritual protection from decay. A nice thought, though you suspect the real goal was to keep his ghost from haunting people over spoiled fish. You walk past a group of workers eating their midday rations, flat bread, a boiled onion, and a weak beer. The beer smells like sour bread soup. The onion? Slightly burned, but still better than the fish jerky your neighbor tried to share last week. Someone jokes, you can't trust a man who doesn't like onions. Everyone nods. There's a reason pyramid builders were fed rations heavy in onions, garlic, and radishes. Not only for calories, but for what people thought were medicinal effects. Better strength, stamina, and a longer life. Never mind that your breath now qualifies as a weapon. You hear your name shouted. A merchant waves you over. He has a special, sun-dried onions in clay jars, perfect for storage. You haggle, trading 3 barley cakes and a promise to help his cousin haul bricks next week. And now you're carrying your jar like treasure. You'll guard it from neighbors. You'll hide it from your younger siblings. You'll maybe offer one to the gods if something important comes up, like a flood or a fever or an especially bad hair day. At home, you wrap a few bulbs in linen and hang them from the rafters. The scent fills the air. Strong, sharp, comforting. Dinner is basic. Mashed beans, coarse bread, and grilled onion over fire-charred pottery. It's crunchy in places it shouldn't be, but the smoky sweetness cuts through the dryness of the bread. You eat in silence, savoring each bite like a rare treat. You remember the scribe's story, how soldiers in distant lands carried onions into battle, believing they would keep wounds from festering. You believe it. The smell alone could drive off infection, and maybe enemies. Later, you sit beneath the stars, peeling an onion slowly. The skin flakes away like paper, soft and translucent. Each layer beneath is cool, wet, and crisp. You almost forget the grit in your bread. You snack on a slice. Your lips burn slightly. Your stomach growls in approval. And your heart, for some reason, feels a little steadier. There's a comfort in knowing that something so small, so humble, can mean so much. You fall asleep with that jar of onions by your side, just in case. The sun is barely up, and already the Nile is awake, rippling gently, reflecting the gold of the sky like it's trying to seduce the gods. You walk toward the water's edge with a basket on your hip, woven from palm fiber, slightly damp from yesterday's fish. Because today, you're fishing. Not with a rod and reel, not with fancy lures or cold beer in a cooler. You've got a reed net, a sharp stick, and hopes that the river's mood will be generous. Fish is a staple here, especially for those of you without access to royal butcheries. You can't afford roasted goose or honey-glazed duck. But if you're lucky, the Nile will gift you a tilapia or a catfish that hasn't already been picked clean by crocodiles. You wade into the shallows. The mud squelches between your toes. Papyrus stalks sway beside you, tall and whispering. Something splashes nearby, too small for a hippo, you hope. The water's warm, the current gentle. You lower the net with care, eyes scanning for movement. In ancient Egypt, the Nile isn't just a river, it's a divine vein pulsing through the country, the difference between feast and famine. Still, it has its hazards. Parasites, bacteria, even fish that carry tiny hitchhikers capable of causing fever, fatigue, or worse. Historians still argue whether the ancients knew exactly what caused these diseases, but they knew the symptoms well. Coughs that never ended. Skin that itched until it bled. The river gives, but it also takes. You snatch a glimmering flash, success, a wriggling tilapia, slippery and wide-eyed. It's not huge, but it's enough for lunch, maybe dinner if you stretch it. You drop it into your basket and keep moving, the reeds brushing your arms like curious ghosts. You remember your uncle once caught a monstrous catfish longer than his arm. He paraded it through the village, head held high. By evening, half of it had spoiled, and the other half was so salty from preservation that chewing it made your lips curl. Because that's the thing about fish in this heat. If you don't preserve it fast, it turns into a regrettable science experiment. So after catching what you can, you head home, where your family has already lit a small fire. You scale the fish with a sharp flint and gut it carefully. The smell is immediate, briny and raw. You stuff the cavity with herbs if you have them. Dill, perhaps, or maybe wild mint. Then comes the drying. You split the fish, rub it with salt, and lay it out on a flat stone in the sun. Flies gather, buzzing in a cloud. You wave them off with a frond, eyes narrowed. The drying takes hours, sometimes days, and it never smells better. You wonder if anyone ever really enjoys dried fish. It's chewy, it's flaky, sometimes it crumbles into salt-dusted shards, but it keeps you alive. Your neighbor's wife is boiling fish bones into broth. She claims it strengthens the blood. She hands you a bowl. It's cloudy, hot, and has a distinctly fishy funk, but it warms your hands and fills your belly. Even the gods are offered fish. Though, ironically, some temples forbid fish entirely, particularly catfish, which are associated with chaos. One temple in Esna had a whole ritual to purify priests if they accidentally ate one. A mistake that probably required a lot of groveling. You help your cousin repair a net while the dried fish crumbles beside you. Each knot is tight, each reed fiber smoothed by countless hands. You joke about becoming a fisherman full-time, but she laughs. Only if you want to smell like regret forever. You nibble a piece of dried perch later, gnawing through the leathery texture. It's salty, tough, and vaguely sour. Your jaw does most of the work. You wonder how anyone has teeth past the age of 30. Children nearby suck on fish heads like candy. It's protein, it's chewy, it's cultural. You try not to watch too closely, and yet, you're grateful. In a land where meat is rare, fish is survival. It may be dry, it may be smelly, it may come with a side of parasites, but it's food. You look to the river, where the water glimmers beneath the fading light. Another day, another fish, and the soft hum of insects around your drying racks sings you gently into evening. You roll over, stretch your back, and wince. It's sore again. Not because you slept wrong, but because yesterday you helped haul a dead cow. Or, more accurately, the parts of one. Because today, we talk about meat. And you don't get much of it. Unless you're wealthy, a priest, or royalty. Meat in ancient Egypt is about as common as a snowstorm in the desert. You get it on special days, festival days. Days when a goose happens to collapse in front of your hut and no one asks questions. Otherwise, meat is for gods and mummies. You walk toward the market district, the scent of singed feathers and bone broth hanging in the air. Someone is butchering a duck, probably for an offering. You pause to watch, partly curious, partly hungry. The bird's skin is removed in practiced swift motions. The butcher hums as he works, his blade worn but sharp. Your mouth waters, but you don't have the grain reserves to barter for duck, so you move on. Historians still argue about how often common Egyptians actually ate meat. Some evidence, like bones in trash heaps, suggests more than you'd expect. Others say the bones mostly belong to temples or the homes of the elite. Either way, you know your meat supply is more theoretical than actual. You think back to the last festival. There'd been meat then. Not much, but enough to count. A roasted leg of goat passed around like treasure. Everyone took tiny bites, savored it like a dream. You licked your fingers afterward for longer than you're proud of. Today, though, meat comes in a different form. You pass a friend boiling animal bones to make stock. The smell is rich, almost meaty, and fills the nostrils with the promise of calories. He throws in some dried onions, a few lentils, and maybe, just maybe, a strip of old dried beef so tough it could stop a blade. You help him stir. The fire crackles, the water simmers. Flies hover nearby, bold and determined. You fan them off with a frond, but they always come back. They always do. Eventually, he scoops out a bowl for you. The broth is thin but hot and has that deep umami flavor that only comes from cooking bones for hours. You drink it slowly, letting the warmth settle in your belly. Back in your hut, your brother has caught a pigeon. A skinny, mangy-looking thing, but meat is meat. He plucks it quickly, and you help roast it over hot stones. No spices, no oil. Just smoke, fire, and bird. You each get a wing and a bite of breast. The meat is chewy, full of sinew, but rich with flavor. You gnaw on a piece of crispy skin like it's gold. Later, someone tells you about crocodile meat. Rare, dangerous, and strictly forbidden in many parts of Egypt. But a fisherman up north once speared one and fed half his village. He died a month later from a strange fever. Coincidence, maybe? But no one's eager to try it again. You helped clean out a communal storage pot, one where salted meat used to be kept. It's nearly empty now, just a sliver of fat clinging to the sides. You scrape it out and add it to lentil mash. Even fat is a luxury. Rendered animal fat is used for cooking, lighting lamps, and sometimes skin care. You've seen women use goose fat to soften their hands. You've also seen it attract more flies than it repels. Beauty is pain. The richest people? They dine on oxen, antelope, roasted duck, and honey-glazed goose. Their banquets are legendary, depicted on tomb walls with lavish illustrations of platters and servants. You've stared at those murals before, practically drooling. Meanwhile, your meat options are mostly dried, salted, or preserved in something that smells suspiciously like spoiled ambition. You pass a man selling jerky, thin strips of preserved beef hanging from a rack, dusty and sun-cured. He offers you a piece. You bite in and nearly break a tooth. It's tough as sandal leather, but after a few minutes it softens. And here's a strange fact. Some believe meat left as offerings in tombs wasn't real. It was made of painted wood or wax. Symbolic food. Spiritual nourishment. You wonder if any angry ghost ever came back to complain about getting fake ribs for eternity. As the sun sets, you sit with your family around a small fire. Tonight, there's a bit of lamb fat mixed into the grain mash. Someone scored a small cut from a temple cook in exchange for a favor. It's barely a mouthful, but it changes everything. The flavor is richer, the texture smoother. You close your eyes and pretend it's roast duck with dates. You sleep that night with the taste still lingering on your tongue, a whisper of richness, a hint of festival. Meat may not be common in your world, but it's unforgettable. You lean back against a sun-warmed wall, chewing slowly, not because you're savoring the flavor, but because your jaw is tired. Again, a familiar dull ache pulses along your gums, a side effect of bread that doubles as building material. But today your mind isn't on chewing, it's on what comes after. Because after every bite, after every meal, comes the question, what do you do with what's left? In ancient Egypt, food waste wasn't just about scraps, it was about shame, about sacredness, about not tempting fate by throwing away what the Nile, the sun, and your aching back had fought so hard to give you. You glance at the bowl beside you. There's a crust of barley bread left behind, too dry to eat, too sacred to throw. You wrap it in linen and place it near the hearth. Tomorrow it might be softened in beer or ground into crumbs and mixed with lentils. Or, if your sister's in a good mood, pressed with honey and shaped into a lumpy kind of cake. It will still taste like regret, but at least it won't be waste. The elders always said, to waste food is to insult the gods. So you use everything, every peel, every grain, every fish bone and onion skin. Even ash has a place, scattered in gardens to enrich the soil or used to scrub cooking pots so they shine under temple light. In the marketplace, you once watched a merchant carefully collect bruised figs from the ground, not to toss, but to mash into a paste for fermentation. The smell was intense, sweet, sharp, and slightly suspicious. But give it time and it became a thick syrup that tasted better than you'd expect. Or at least, less terrible. Your neighbor has a system. Leftover porridge becomes breakfast again with enough beer poured over it. Stale bread is dipped in sour milk and baked into something chewy and passable. And dried out radish greens? Thrown onto the fire with a prayer that they'll keep the flies away. They don't. But the smoke helps. You remember a time during a poor harvest when every household in the village held onto waste like it was treasure. People boiled onion skins for broth. They dried beet peels and crushed them into seasoning powder. One clever woman even turned spoiled lentils into a kind of savory glue for patching cracked pots. You weren't sure if it worked, but the priest blessed it anyway. Because here, nothing dies alone. Not even spoiled food. If a jar of barley mash turns sour before you can eat it, you still find a use. Feed it to the chickens who seem immune to flavor. Or let it ferment longer until it becomes a bitter spread that if you close your eyes, might resemble cheese. Sort of. With enough herbs, maybe. The village cats, lean and smug, prowl near your kitchen every morning. They know the routines. They know where the scraps fall. Sometimes you swear they understand your schedule better than you do. One even scratched you once for tossing a fish head into the fire instead of into his waiting paws. You apologized. It seemed safer. And it's not just animals watching. The spirits watch too. So say the elders. That's why you leave a little food on the ground beside your door once a month. A crust of bread, a smear of bean paste, a fig if you're feeling generous. Not for the living, for those who came before. For the ancestors who walked these same dusty paths, who ground their grain on the same stones, who bent over the same smoky fires. It's not waste, it's remembrance. Still, some things go too far. You remember the fermented leek disaster of last year. Someone forgot a jar in the sun, and when they opened it, the smell traveled faster than gossip. The scribe passed out, a goat cried. The jar was buried, ceremonially, with incense. You help out a neighbor today, cleaning her storeroom. There's a sealed jar in the corner, crusted with beeswax and dread. No one remembers what's inside. You open it slowly, carefully, and find a blackened lump that might once have been fish, or meat, or ambition. You bury it without discussion. But not everything is a horror. Some waste becomes wonder. You once tasted a stew made entirely from leftovers, bits of dried lentils, a crushed date, stale beer, a single radish, and what may have been yesterday's onion skin tea. It was glorious, salty, earthy, layered, The cook called it everything stew. You called it magic. The truth is, you've become an alchemist, turning rot into ritual, scraps into sustenance, mistakes into meals. Even the children play their part. You watch your little cousin licking a smear of honey off a broken fig. He grins, face sticky, then eats the rest, seeds, stem, and all. Nothing wasted. Nothing questioned. Later, you gather the day's scraps, too small to store, too clean to throw. You mix them with water and clay and shape them into small balls. You set them near the fire. Tomorrow they'll be thrown into the bread oven to test the heat. If they burn, the oven is too hot. If they brown slowly, it's perfect. Waste becomes tool. Because here in ancient Egypt, even your trash serves a purpose. And you've learned to measure value not by taste, but by effort. Not by flavor, but by survival. You fall asleep that night with the scent of smoke still in your hair, a crust of bread wrapped in cloth near your mat, and the comfort of knowing that nothing, no matter how small, is ever truly lost. Not here. Not in this land of sacred crumbs and blessed scraps. The days drag, predictable and dusty, until suddenly, they don't. You wake before the first rooster cries, before the flies remember your face, to the sound of something rare, laughter. It trickles through the alleys, light, sharp, familiar. You sit up fast, linen clinging to your back, and remember. Today is the festival of the first harvest. It's the day the village pauses its chewing and grinding and fretting. The day the scribes lower their styluses, the bakers stop cursing the ovens, and even the priests crack a smile. It's a day for food. Real food. You pull on your cleanest tunic, only slightly stained with fig paste, and step into the bright morning air. The sun is kinder today, hiding behind a veil of cloud. The Nile glistens, not like a threat, but a promise. Down at the village square, the air buzzes with movement. Women lay out reed mats, covered in jars, baskets, and trays. Men haul clay pots from their homes, steam escaping from beneath linen lids. Children run in circles, already sticky with date syrup. This is no ordinary meal. This is a banquet for the gods and everyone else. You join the crowd, helping arrange offerings on a painted table. Bowls of lentils shaped into spirals, onions rubbed with oil until they gleam. Honey cakes molded into animal forms, fish, birds, jackals. Some cracked, some perfect, all sacred. Historians might call this symbolic, but you know better. This is survival turned into celebration. A priest arrives, robes fluttering, beard oiled and neat. He carries incense, which he waves over the food, mumbling words that only the gods, and maybe his apprentice, understand. You bow your head anyway, because today the food isn't just yours. It belongs to them, the watchers, the whisperers, the ones who kept the flood gentle and the grain high. You watch as a jug of beer is poured slowly onto the earth, a libation. It hisses softly as it sinks in, like the ground itself is thirsty. Then comes the best part, the distribution. The offerings made, the blessings spoken, the spirits thanked. And now, the feast belongs to the living. Hands reach out, not greedy but joyful. Bread is torn, lentils scooped. Someone passes you a triangle loaf still warm from the oven, the top brushed with honey and scattered with sesame. You bite in. It's soft, sweet, miraculous. You eat slowly, reverently. This isn't chewing. This is remembering. Around you, people exchange old family recipes. One woman talks of her grandmother's spice paste, made from ground coriander and pickled radish. Another brags about her uncle's dried fish cured in lemon and smugness. You try everything. You try everything. There's grilled duck, rare, rich, dark-skinned and dripping with citrus glaze. There are pickled garlic cloves so sharp they bring tears, and not from sadness. There's a stew of lentils, leeks, and a whisper of fenugreek, stirred for hours in a temple pot. There's even milk pudding, set with gelatin scraped from boiled fish bones, sweetened with date syrup, and dusted with cinnamon. It wobbles slightly on your tongue before melting into joy. You watch a group of children shaping bread into little gods, pressing eyes into dough, laughing as they make up myths. "This one eats only onions," says one boy, waving a crooked loaf. "This one burps lightning," says another. Even play becomes devotion. Later, you help your cousin set up a corner for storytelling. A man with a voice like gravel tells tales of the first harvest, of gods who wept barley from their eyes, of cows that gave milk so sweet it healed curses. You listen, crumbs on your chin, breath thick with beer and butter. By afternoon, the sun returns in full. You seek shade, belly round and heart full. Someone passes you fermented fig water, cool, tart, slightly intoxicating. You sip slowly, eyes half closed, hearing only the murmur of grateful people chewing. Even the animals are fed today. Goats chew dried radish leaves like royalty. Chickens pick at cooked lentils with alarming coordination. The village dog, usually ignored, wears a wreath of reeds and sleeps under the date tree, a fat fishbone between its paws. As evening approaches, the music begins. A flute made from reed, a drum stretched with fish skin, voices raised in messy harmony. People sway, some dance, a few pretend not to. And all around you, food is still being shared. The gods, it seems, are generous today. You end the night on the temple steps, chewing one last bite of honey cake. The fifth or sixth, you've lost count. A friend leans over. Do you think the gods actually eat any of it? You shrug. Maybe just the best parts. He nods, serious. Then let them take my burnt onions. You both laugh. Not the tired laugh of daily survival, but the deep, slow laugh of people who, just for today, have eaten more than enough. You walk home with a bundle of leftover bread under your arm, still warm. You'll eat it tomorrow, dipped in whatever stew is left, and it won't taste the same. It will taste like memory. Because food, in Egypt, is more than nourishment. It's a language, a legacy, a bridge between worlds. And today you've spoken it fluently. You fall asleep that night with the smell of spice in your hair, the echo of flutes in your ears, and the soft heaviness of sacred food in your belly. Not just full, but fulfilled. The festival has passed. The drums have quieted. The flutes are sleeping in someone's satchel, and the last honey cake was eaten, or maybe stolen under moonlight. Now life returns to rhythm. But in the rhythm of daily life, there's another pattern. Softer, older, half-whispered between meals and fever dreams. Because here, in the land of gods and grit, your kitchen is more than a place to cook. It's a place to heal. Your mother always said that the real physician in the village wasn't the priest. It was the old pot in the corner of the hearth. You didn't believe her. Not until your cousin stepped on a fish spine, and she boiled onions into a poultice that drew the infection out like a miracle. Not until she cured your uncle's cough with garlic tea so strong it peeled the paint off the shrine walls. Not until you saw her mix sour beer and honey into a syrup that stopped your sister's belly from turning inside out. You wake this morning with a scratchy throat and a sore knee. Nothing unusual. The throat is from sleeping near the smoke again. The knee? Probably from kneeling too long at the millstone. So you head to the kitchen, not to eat but to mix. First, you crush dried mint into powder. You mix it with vinegar and pour it into a clay cup. It's sharp, almost painful, but the coolness spreads through your chest like shade in the desert. Then you grab a pinch of fenugreek. It smells like earth and spice and something your grandmother used for everything from rashes to stubborn spirits. You add it to lentil stew and whisper a small prayer. Because that's the thing. Here food is never just food. A cup of warm beer with coriander is medicine. Bread rubbed with garlic wards off colds, or demons, or both. Dried fig paste eases sore muscles when smeared on skin. Or so the elders say. You've seen a man wrap fermented lettuce leaves around a swollen ankle. You've watched a woman grind barley with burnt date seeds to make a black salve for insect bites. And once, memorably, your aunt poured sour milk behind the door to trap bad dreams. It didn't work. The dreams came back. So did the smell. Still you try again. You pluck a strand of dried thyme, crumble it between your fingers, and drop it into boiling water. The steam curls around your face like a blessing. You breathe it in, hoping it does something. You remember the scribe's wife swearing by boiled radish water. She drank it every morning for internal strength. She also yelled at goats and claimed her cat could predict storms. But her skin did glow. And the gods? Even they need healing food. Offerings to Sekhmet, goddess of plagues, often include sour wine, overripe pomegranates, and blood-thick stew. Because the angrier the goddess, the stronger the meal needs to be. You once saw a temple cook cry into a pot of garlic and bean mash meant for a sick child's altar. It helps, she said. The salt, the sorrow, it makes it stronger. You didn't question it. In your home, there's a small jar of preserved lemon rind and honey. It's been passed down like an heirloom. When someone coughs, you scrape a sliver from it, melt it in hot beer, and serve it in silence. No one talks while drinking healing beer. That's the rule. Outside, the heat rises. The air is thick with dust and rumors of fever. You tie a sprig of basil around your neck. Protection. Not just from sickness, from gossip, from bad luck, from that neighbor who never covers her mouth when she sneezes. At the market, a woman sells bundles of dried chamomile tied with reed twine. She claims they were blessed under the full moon. You buy one, not because you believe her, but because her smile is kind and you like how it smells. You pass a man boiling fish bones in vinegar. He waves you over, presses a hot spoon into your hand. Good for the joints, he says. You nod. Your knees agree. That evening, you find a beetle in your storage pot. Not a big one, just enough to ruin your appetite. You sigh, toss the infested flour to the chickens, and light a bundle of myrrh. You circle the jar 3 times, not for bugs, for peace. Because in Egypt, the line between food and spell is thin. A bowl of sour porridge left on the windowsill keeps spirits out. Chewing dried dill calms the tongue of a liar, or helps you survive their company. Even salt isn't just seasoning, it's a shield. You've seen people draw lines of it around a sleeping mat to keep nightmares from walking in. And always, there's honey. Honey for wounds. Honey for sore eyes. Honey mixed with beer to coat a sore throat. Honey baked into bread for those too sad to eat. Honey offered to the gods with such frequency, you wonder if divinity has a sweet tooth. You lie down that night with a warm stone at your feet and a smear of mint oil on your chest. Your mother hums a lullaby made of herb names and whispered prayers. Your belly is mostly empty, but your heart is full. The wind shifts. The fire softens. Somewhere in the corner, the old jar of healing lemon rinds glows faintly in the ember light. You close your eyes, taste thyme on your breath, and feel sleep take you gently. Because here, in this kitchen of clay and smoke, the food doesn't just feed you, it watches over you, it remembers you. And sometimes, if the gods are listening, it heals you too. Some nights you eat in silence not because you're tired, but because you don't want to offend the gods. It sounds dramatic. But here in Egypt, every bite is watched, not just by neighbors or hungry children or a judgmental cat, but by forces older than stone, older than grain. You sit down at dusk, a shallow bowl of barley mash in your lap. The fire crackles low, and the shadows on the wall stretch long. You lift the first spoonful, then pause. Out of habit, maybe. Or reverence. Because in this land, eating is a kind of prayer. You've done it your whole life. A pinch of flour tossed into the fire before kneading, a piece of bread broken and left at the doorstep, a drop of beer spilled on the ground before sipping. No one told you to do it. You just learned. Learned that food can summon, that food can protect. That food, prepared with care, offered with breath held, might keep a fever away, or a shadow, or a curse passed down through careless generations. You've seen what happens when people forget. When someone mocks a temple loaf, when someone swallows an offering meant for the dead. You remember the sickness that followed, the dreams, the silence that came afterward and wouldn't leave for weeks. So yes, you bow your head when you eat. Even if it's just onions and bread, especially if it's just onions and bread, because those are sacred. You remember the story of the starving woman who made bread from sand and her own tears. They say the gods wept for her, that her grave was filled with wheat, that her spirit walks the harvest fields and blesses the first cut stalk. You're not sure if it's true, but you always cry a little when you grind grain. Just in case. Your neighbor ties amulets made of dried lentils and string, not for decoration, for health, for birth, for safety during travel. She places one above her stove, another near her grain jars. They rattle softly when the wind shifts. She says it's the gods saying hello. You smile, but you don't laugh. Because food isn't just food here, it's record-keeping, of gratitude, of guilt, of promises made in the dark. You've seen a widow place a triangle loaf on her husband's grave every month. The same shape, the same flour, sometimes with salt, sometimes without, depending on her dreams. You've seen lovers exchange figs wrapped in linen, each fruit etched with tiny symbols for fertility, luck, protection. They eat them in the moonlight, chewing slowly, as if tasting prophecy. You once caught your cousin whispering to a pot of beer. She said it helps it ferment better. You didn't ask what she told it. Even children know. They press flower petals into their dough for fun, but always with their eyes closed, like they're making a wish, like they're placing hope between the layers of bread. And temples? Temples don't just serve the gods, they feed them. Offerings aren't just symbolic, they're meals. thoughtfully prepared, ritually placed, and in some cases, consumed by the priests after the divine essence is absorbed. You've seen leftover loaves from an altar sold quietly in the market. No one says it's sacred, but everyone eats it more carefully. You once found an old papyrus listing ideal food offerings by day. Day of Ra, bread baked in sun-dried ovens. Day of Isis, goat's milk mixed with honey and salt. Day of Anubis, black lentils, sour beer, dried fish arranged in pairs. You copied it and hung it near your hearth. Not because you're devout, because your dreams have been strange lately. Tonight, your mother sprinkles coriander over the stew, not for taste, for protection. She stirs counterclockwise, she murmurs names. You don't recognize them, you don't ask, you eat slowly. You leave the last bite in the bowl. You look to the window where the moon casts a silver line across the floor, and you say nothing. Because saying nothing, that's part of the ritual too. After dinner, you clean the pot with sand and warm water. Then you leave a fig on the threshold, not because you're afraid, because you respect. You go to sleep that night with the scent of garlic still on your fingers and the echo of your mother's chant behind your eyes. And you dream of loaves that speak, of beer that sings, of onions that float in midair while gods laugh like thunder. You wake before dawn, lips dry, heart steady, and in the corner of your room, the fig is gone, not bitten, not rotted, gone. You don't ask where it went, you grind your grain, you light your fire, you knead your dough with your eyes half closed, and you whisper one line into the smoke, "Eat with me, but leave me whole." Because in Egypt, food is not a need, it's a pact. The fig vanished, and with it, something else shifted. A quiet click in the pattern of your days. You can't explain it, but you feel it. So the next morning, when the neighbor woman invites you into her courtyard, whispering that she's preparing the old dish, you go. Not because you're hungry, because you're curious. She's already grinding something strange, seeds you don't recognize, dark and oily, mixed with something dried and bitter smelling. She adds water, then crushed dates, then ashes. She sees your face. "Don't ask," she says. "It's not for eating, it's for remembering." She shapes the paste into small discs, presses her thumb into the center of each, then lines them along a stone slab. We dry them for 3 nights, then bury them under the hearth. "For what?" you ask. "To quiet things," she says, "to feed what doesn't knock." You don't ask again. This is Egypt. Not everything on the table is for your mouth. Some foods are made to be buried, some to be burned, some to be spoken to, then forgotten. That afternoon, you walk past the temple of Anubis and catch the scent of roasted radish and burnt coriander. Not a feast. A funeral. You know the difference. Inside, the priests arrange offerings for a child who died too young. They say his ka was restless, that he couldn't find the door to the next world. So they prepare the guiding meal, milk curd shaped like a boat, a crust of bread carved into a tiny jackal, a bowl of black lentil stew, with an egg yolk floating in the center like a sun. Not to eat, to light the way. You go home thinking of that, of foods made not for taste, but for meaning. Meals that carry symbols like seeds. You remember your aunt once shaped dumplings filled with crushed beetles and herbs during a solar eclipse. She said it would protect the house from collapse. You ate one. It was awful, but the house still stands. At night, your grandmother mixes a powder of dried lotus petal, goat milk, and fermented barley, and applies it to the floor near the door. She says it keeps the dreams from crawling in. You don't argue, because some nights the dreams feel real, and some foods feel like answers to questions you didn't know you'd asked. Later, you sip a tea of sour herbs. It numbs your tongue. It makes your head feel light. You stare into the fire and wonder how many generations have made this tea. And why? You fall asleep to the smell of something burning in the hearth, not wood, not grain, but something ancient. And the dreams stay away. You don't notice when it starts. The days get shorter. The Nile's edge creeps back. The sun sets with a sigh. Harvest is over, and now the grain is counted. The pots are sealed. The bread is baked in batches, not daily. The rhythm slows. The village gets quieter. Even the dogs bark less. This is the season of storing, of stretching, of rationing, but it's also the season of memory. You're invited to a dinner, not a feast, not quite a ceremony, just a gathering of the oldest villagers. Those who still remember when the current scribe had no beard. Those who saw a pharaoh pass by once, many floods ago. They eat slowly, silently. You watch as they dip bread in oil, chew onion petals folded like paper, sip thin broth thick with years. No one says much, but everything they do says something. This is how we've always eaten. This is how we remember. This is how we continue. One of them hands you a piece of bread. It's dry, ridged with fingerprints, stamped with a symbol you don't know. You eat it, carefully. Later, someone tells the story of the famine year, when people boiled leather straps and chewed on date pits, when priests told families to bake dreams into their dough and feed each other stories instead of stew. You ask, did it work? The old woman shrugs. We're still here. That night, you think of last meals, not sad ones, sacred ones. The meal before marriage. The meal before the birth of a child. The meal before crossing the desert. Before a hunt. Before a burial. Before forgetting. Each marked not by excess, but by intention. You remember the bread your mother gave you before you first slept outside alone. She tore it in half, placed salt on it, whispered a name into it, and handed it to you like it was a torch. You ate it in the dark under a fig tree, trying not to cry. You remember the fig, years later, that disappeared without a trace. It all circles back. Because here, in this land of dry wind and sacred soil, food is more than survival. It is the first word you speak with the gods, and the last one you whisper when no one else is listening. And just like that, the night exhales. The dreams soften. The world stirs once more. The fig is gone. The old ones have gone quiet. The fire burns low. And you sit alone beside the empty bowl, watching the last of the steam spiral upward like a forgotten prayer. It's almost morning. Not quite. There's that soft blue stillness between darkness and light, where everything slows and breathes and listens. And in that pause, as the fire hums low and your joints throb with the memory of motion, you realize something simple but sacred. You are still here. Despite the chipped teeth and spoiled beer, despite the prayers whispered into bread and the ghosts that visit through dreams, despite the hunger you carried through your childhood like a shadow, you are still here. And that means there is still work to do. You rise slowly, the reed mat crackling beneath your knees. Your fingers move on their own, folding the linen cloth over what's left of yesterday's rations. A heel of bread, a dried onion, a smear of fig. Not a feast, but enough. Always enough. You glance toward the window. Not quite dawn, but close. The air is cooler now, touched by the Nile's breath. In the distance, you hear the soft thump of someone rolling grain jars, the bark of a dog chasing ghosts. The world is stirring, and so must you. You make your way outside, bare feet pressed into sand, still holding the night's warmth. The sky is beginning to shift, indigo softening into gray. A single bird cries out. You answer with silence. Past the bakery, smoke curls gently from the roof vent. You smell barley burning. Someone slept too long. It happens. At the edge of the village, you stop. There, beside the well-worn path to the granary, is a tiny altar. Just stones stacked in a rough circle, cradling a blackened bowl. Inside, someone has placed an offering. A single date, dried and split open like a mouth mid-prayer. You add a pinch of ground grain from your pouch. Not much, just a breath's worth. A gesture. Then you bow, not fully, just slightly, just enough for the gods to notice if they're watching. They always are. You keep walking. The granary looms ahead like a quiet guardian. Beehive-shaped and ancient, it smells of dust and history. Two scribes lean outside the door, half asleep, chewing something bitter and pretending it helps them stay alert. One nods at you. You nod back. You know each other, but only in this language of fatigue and bread and duty. Inside, you check your family's basket. Still sealed. Still enough. For now. You gather what you need. A portion of barley, a handful of emmer, a few pulses for trade. Then you return. The sun is rising now, golden fingers stretching across the rooftops. Shadows scatter. The flies return. So do the voices. The village is waking, and with it the rhythm. The same rhythm that's carried your people through dynasties and droughts and floods and famines. A rhythm written not in song, but in motion. Grind the grain, knead the dough, stoke the fire, salt the fish, wash the leaves, count the jars, chew, swallow, bless. Begin again. You greet your mother as she rolls out fresh dough, her wrists dusted in flour and memory. She hums under her breath, a tune you recognize but have never learned. It's older than you, older than her. You take your place at the hearth and feed the fire a sliver of last year's olive wood. It cracks in protest, then settles into embered glow. The pot beside you bubbles gently. Lentils, softened with yesterday's broth. You stir slowly, clockwise. Always clockwise. You taste it. Warm, bland, slightly sweet. You add coriander, then salt, then silence. Outside, children chase a dog through the dust. The baker yells, the brewer sings off-key. Somewhere, someone breaks a jar and swears loudly. It's perfect, because this noise, this smoke, this repetition is the real magic. Not the rituals or the offerings or the moonlit chants, but the doing, the rise and fall of daily effort, the sacred pulse of survival wrapped in dust and habit. You dip a bowl into the lentil pot and hand it to your brother. He takes it without a word, sits, eats, no thanks, none needed. You chew your own portion slowly. A beetle floats in the bowl. You flick it away. Some things never change, and you're glad, because what you feared more than hunger or storms or spirits was that one day this rhythm would stop, that the hands would forget the motion, that the fire would go out. But it hasn't. You sip the last of the broth and wipe the bowl clean with a piece of flatbread. Then you stand and stretch and breathe. Because dawn has come, the world has returned, and it's time once again to begin. It's dawn again, and the village is stirring. But this morning something's different. You smell it before you see it. Rich spices, roasting meat, and the unmistakable scent of fresh bread that isn't scorched or gritty. No, today isn't ordinary. Today is a burial. Not yours, fortunately, but someone nearby, an elder from a well-off family, has passed, and that means only one thing to your empty stomach: a funeral feast. You make your way toward the gathering, brushing dust off your tunic, hoping no one notices the tear at the hem. As you walk, the streets grow more crowded. Women carry baskets of offerings, figs, bread, garlic, honey cakes wrapped in linen. Men trail behind, balancing clay jugs of beer on their shoulders like sleepy acrobats. Funerals in Egypt aren't quiet affairs. They're processions, theater, offerings, drama, and for the dead, luxury meals. The courtyard is already set, reed mats rolled out. Tall jars of wine resting in the shade, wooden trays stacked with roast meat, bowls of lentils, salted fish, pickled vegetables, and your eyes widen. Fresh fruit, grapes, dates, even pomegranates. You sit near the back, trying not to look too eager. Everyone knows you're mostly here for the food, but no one says anything. They're doing the same. Historians still argue whether these foods were actually eaten during the funeral or just displayed before being buried with the deceased. In this case, you're hoping the family isn't feeling too symbolic. The priest begins chanting. A linen-wrapped figure lies beside a shallow pit lined with painted pottery. The dead man's face is serene, or maybe just very well mummified. You lower your gaze, muttering the ritual phrases. The gods are thanked. The soul is blessed. The body is sprinkled with natron and prayers, and then finally the food is offered. First to the gods, then to the deceased, and once the official nod comes, to everyone else. The feast begins like an unspoken storm. Hands reach out, bread is broken, the beer is passed, you manage to snag a piece of roast duck, actual duck, before it's gone. The skin is crisp, the meat still warm. You chew slowly, eyes half closed. You remember the last time you tasted duck. 2 years ago, during another funeral. You hope no one else has to die soon, but also, if they do, you wouldn't say no to another feast. A boy passes you a honey cake, soft, sticky, and shaped like a lotus blossom. You take it with both hands, marveling at the texture. It's sweet, heavy with date paste, and glazed with something golden. Someone's grandmother hands out pomegranate seeds in a clay bowl. You pop a few in your mouth, the juice tart and cold. For a moment, your tongue forgets the taste of barley. Meanwhile, the official mourners cry loudly, wailing as they throw dust in the air. One even collapses dramatically, and no one questions it. Mourning is performance, a necessary part of releasing the soul. Behind you, someone mutters a joke. If I get a send-off like this, make sure they roast the goat slower. Last time it was half raw. You stifle a laugh, nearly choking on a fig. As you continue eating, you remember that food for the dead isn't just ritual, it's cosmic fuel. Egyptians believe the Ka, the spiritual double, needs nourishment in the afterlife. That's why tombs are packed with food models, preserved meals, and murals of banquets. Of course, real food is also buried: salted meat, bread, fruits, and wine sealed in jars. Sometimes they're even magically activated through ritual so the spirit can consume their essence. You once saw a tomb being prepared. Workers hauling in baskets of onions, dried fish, honey jars, and whole ducks. Not to be eaten but entombed. It felt strange, like locking treasure away. Today's feast is less symbolic, more practical. You eat what you can. Later, what's left will go into the tomb. The rest, claimed by the cleverest villagers. You eye the basket of leftover flatbread and already plan to sneak one on your way out. The sun climbs higher, the beer jugs empty, people begin to drift away, bellies full and spirits lightened. The priest murmurs a final chant. The pit is sealed with stone and sand. You linger for a moment, watching the dust settle. The food was good, the moment solemn. But in Egypt, death is never just an ending. It's a transition, a journey, and food is your passport to eternity. You walk home slowly, honey still on your lips, mind already replaying the flavors. It may be the dead who are honored, but today, for a few sacred hours, the living ate like gods. You're kneeling in the dirt again, fingers deep in the soil, pulling up something green and slightly sticky. It's lettuce, but not the kind that pairs well with croutons and ranch dressing. This lettuce? It's sacred, it's strange, and it's definitely not for Caesar salads. In ancient Egypt, lettuce isn't just a side dish, it's a symbol. A powerful one. You brush the dirt off a long, upright stalk. It's called Lactuca cereola, the wild ancestor of the lettuce we know today. It's bitter, tall, and when you snap it open, a milky sap oozes out. That sap? Highly symbolic and mildly psychoactive. The gods loved lettuce, especially Min, the fertility god. He's often shown holding a lettuce stalk, standing at full, attention. The symbolism wasn't exactly subtle. You carry your harvest to the temple gardens, where a priest awaits. He nods approvingly and begins sorting the stalks. Some will be used in rituals, others pressed for oil. A few, very few, might end up on someone's plate. Historians still debate whether the ancient Egyptians actually ate this variety of lettuce regularly, or if it was reserved mostly for offerings and ceremonies. But what's clear is that it wasn't just a food, it was a sacred object. You remember a festival from last season. The statues of Min were paraded through the village, draped in linen, crowned with lettuce garlands. Priests sang, dancers swayed, and baskets of vegetables were thrown into the crowd. You caught a lettuce stalk and held it like a prize. That night, couples disappeared into the fields. The implication was clear. But today, there's no festival, just work. You carry a bundle of greens back to your home and try to make a stew. You add onions, a scrap of lentils, and a splash of beer. The lettuce wilts quickly, turning soft and dark. It smells earthy, slightly bitter, like oversteeped tea. You sip it slowly, hoping for strength, hoping for fertility, maybe even hoping for a tiny miracle, like not running out of food this week. Your sister crushes lettuce seeds into a small jar of oil. She says it helps with skin rashes and bad dreams. You nod, not quite believing, but not willing to risk ignoring it either. One elder in the village swears lettuce wards off evil spirits. Another says it cures fevers. Yet another insists it prevents baldness, which you notice he hasn't avoided himself. Still, you rub a little sap into your scalp just in case. You walk past a young couple whispering in the shade of a palm. She's wearing a necklace made of dried lettuce leaves. He's offering her a small bundle like a love token. You roll your eyes, but also, you kind of get it. Later, as the sun dips low, you help prepare offerings for a small family shrine. There's bread, onions, a jug of beer, and a single, upright lettuce stalk. Placed in the center. Reverently, it catches the fading light like a green candle. You stare at it for a moment, wondering how something so ordinary could mean so much. You think about the layers. Food, medicine, symbol, joke, blessing. Lettuce is all of it. You bite into a raw leaf. It's bitter, fibrous, and leaves a strange coating on your tongue. Not exactly delicious, but you finish it anyway. It's tradition. That night, you dream of tall fields of lettuce swaying in moonlight. And somewhere just beyond the horizon, Min smiles. You wake to a smell that makes your stomach clench before your eyes even open. It's strong, sharp. Something between fish left too long in the sun and, well, something else left even longer. Welcome to the world of ancient Egyptian fermentation. You sit up slowly and step outside where a neighbor is crouched over a ceramic jar. The smell hits you again, full force, and you take an involuntary step back. She's stirring a pot of fermented fish paste, a sort of ancient condiment/preservative/test of your dedication to not starving. She sees your face and laughs. Don't be dramatic. It's ready now. You're not convinced, But in a land where heat spoils food faster than you can bless it, fermentation is survival. It starts with fish, small ones, gutted, then packed tightly in jars with salt, maybe some crushed barley, and sealed with linen soaked in resin. Then the jars are left to bake, not in an oven, in the sun, for days, sometimes weeks. The result? A blackish-brown sludge. Pungent, salty, full of umami before anyone knew what umami was. You cautiously dip a piece of stale bread into the jar and taste it. The flavor explodes on your tongue like a briny thunderclap. Salty, sour, a little sweet, a little wrong, but weirdly addictive. Historians compare it to Roman garum or modern Southeast Asian fish sauce. It's ancient ketchup, in a way, used to spice up everything from lentils to bread to dried meats. But fermentation in Egypt didn't stop with fish. Grains were fermented into beer, fruit into wine, milk into sour yogurt, and dough into that famously tangy, rock-hard bread you've come to love-hate. You help another neighbor bury a clay pot in the sand near her home. Inside, she's fermenting dates. Not to eat, but to make a thick, sticky syrup. She says it helps with digestion, also with toothaches, also with childbirth. You're skeptical, but you nod. In your own home, someone's experimenting with pickled leeks. A bold move. The jar hisses when you open it. You close it quickly. Food preservation isn't a luxury here. It's the only thing standing between you and hunger. The sun that feeds your crops also rots them, and there's no ice, no refrigeration, just shade, clay, salt, and time. The village smells complex. A mixture of yeast, vinegar, sweat, and smoke. You realize that no one here expects food to smell good. Only safe. Still, there's artistry in it. The potter shapes jars to just the right thickness. The brewer tunes the fermentation days by watching the stars. And you do your part by not gagging at the stronger batches. A friend hands you a small cheese ball. It's goat milk, curdled, pressed, and left to dry in a shady spot. You bite into it. It's sour, crumbly, and slightly gritty, but edible. Definitely not soft cheese. That would have melted into soup hours ago. Later, a guest from another village arrives. He brings fermented honeyed figs. You share them around the fire. They're sticky, chewy, and have a faint alcoholic buzz. You feel your head get a little lighter. Your heart, too. You remember hearing that some fermentations were accidental at first. Spoiled food turned oddly tasty, and someone decided to keep it. That brave, desperate soul probably changed history. You glance at a half-empty jar of fermented radish. The smell alone could raise the dead. But it'll keep for months. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians fully understood the science behind fermentation. But they didn't need science to know that burying food in salt and waiting often kept them from starving. Tonight's dinner? Lentil mash, barley flatbread, and a smear of fermented garlic paste. It's strong, eye-watering, and honestly, kind of delicious. You eat it slowly, trying to ignore the crust of salt forming on your lips. As the stars rise, you sit outside with a bowl of sour beer and a piece of sun-dried fish. You think about how your food has been pickled, salted, dried, or buried, and somehow you're still here, still chewing, still surviving. The air this morning is thick, not just with heat, but with a distinct barnyard scent that clings to your skin and clothes before you even step outside. You know that smell. It's cow day. You head toward the pens near the edge of the village, where several oxen and cows are lowing softly in the early light. Flies circle lazily. Children throw handfuls of hay, mostly for fun. And you're there to collect the real prize: milk. Cows are sacred in Egypt. Literally. The goddess Hathor, goddess of motherhood, music, and joy, is often depicted as a cow or a woman with cow horns and a sun disk. These animals are more than livestock. They're divine. Which makes it slightly awkward when you're elbow deep in one, trying to coax milk into a clay jar while the cow looks at you like you've just told a bad joke. You get a good few pours. It's warm, a little foamy, and you carry it home like treasure. But this treasure, it doesn't keep. No refrigeration, no pasteurization, and a climate that treats fresh milk like a challenge. You've got maybe a few hours before it curdles, so you move fast. Back home, your mother is already heating another jar of milk. She stirs it gently over a fire, adding vinegar to start the curdling. You'll separate the whey, press the curds, and get something resembling cheese, at least if the flies don't get to it first. You scoop a little fresh curd from the side of the pot and taste it. It's sour, soft, and tolerable. With a sprinkle of salt, it could almost pass for something fancy, almost. But raw milk is risky. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians drank it fresh or preferred to ferment it immediately. Evidence suggests they didn't often drink it raw, not because they understood bacteria, but because experience taught them the consequences. Goat milk is a bit safer, easier to handle, less volume, but also less risk. You've had goat yogurt before. Thick, tangy, left in clay pots to firm up overnight. It's surprisingly good with dates mashed in. Today, though, there are no dates. So you take your milk, pour it into a jar, wrap it in wet linen, and place it in the shade. Evaporative cooling. It helps a little. Not much, but a little. In temples, cows were often treated better than people. Some had attendants, special feeds, even ceremonial burials. Sacred bulls like Apis were paraded through the city, adorned with jewels. Their death was mourned like a pharaoh's. But your cow? She's sacred, sure. But mostly she's just stubborn and very good at stepping on your foot. You help muck the pen later, clearing dung with a flat piece of wood. The smell is overwhelming. You cough. Your friend jokes that it's the perfume of the Nile. You don't laugh. Still, the cows are important. They plow your fields, provide fertilizer, and offer rare, vital calories in the form of milk. Some families even collect cow dung, dry it, and burn it as fuel. You've cooked over it. You've tried not to think about it. You remember hearing that the wealthy used to mix cream with honey as a skin treatment. You tried it once. Your face smelled like spoiled ambition for days. Sometimes if a cow falls sick or dies, the entire village feels it. Milk vanishes from diets. Rituals are held. People whisper about omens. One time, the priest even blamed a failed harvest on a cow's death. But tonight, your family eats well. There's soft cheese spread on warm bread, milk soup with herbs, and a small lump of clarified butter saved from last week's churn. You sit in the fading light, licking curds from your fingers, watching the cows graze in the dusty twilight. It's not luxury. It's not even consistent, but it's nourishment, from sacred horns to sour yogurt. And for now, that's enough. The day begins with the smell of smoke. Not the cozy campfire kind, but the acrid tang of something salted and once edible being cooked until it begs for mercy. You follow your nose to the back of the village, where preservation season is in full swing. Here, where shade is scarce and flies are not, everyone's trying to beat the clock, because meat and fish, they don't last long in this heat. So unless you want your goose to turn into goo within hours, you preserve it. And by preserve, you mean smoke it, salt it, dry it, or some unholy combination of the three. Today, someone's got a setup made of a pit, 3 stones, and a slab of meat hanging from a reed frame above smoldering dung bricks. You cough as the wind shifts and a cloud of thick, greasy smoke slaps you in the face. Welcome to ancient Egyptian food storage. You crouch beside the pit, eyes watering, and watch fat drip into the coals with a sizzle. The meat, goat, maybe, is already darkened, stiff at the edges, and smells somewhere between barbecue and boot leather. You know it'll be chewier than hope, but at least it won't kill you tomorrow. Another neighbor is salting fish. She presses fillets between slabs of clay and crusts them with coarse salt, scraping off the top layer every few hours and muttering curses at the flies. You help her for a bit, and she rewards you with a piece. It's salty. It's dry. It might survive 1,000 years. In fact, tombs have yielded dried meats and preserved fish that are still recognizable after millennia. That's how serious Egyptians were about food longevity. Historians still argue whether the average household had access to all these preservation methods, or if they were reserved for wealthier homes. But you know that out here, in the back corners of the village, everyone's experimenting. You walk past another family who's sun-drying figs. They've strung them up on thin ropes between 2 clay pots. The fruit is wrinkled, sticky, and coated in dust, but it'll be sweet for weeks. Someone else has stacked salted radishes on woven mats, flipping them over every hour to cure evenly, as she says with a dramatic flourish. You nod approvingly, even if the smell makes your eyes twitch. Inside your home, a few jars sit sealed with beeswax. Pickled onions, fermented garlic paste, a horrifying but effective attempt at lemonade lentils. You're not proud of that last one, but hey, you were curious. The best preserved foods aren't just safe, they're flavorful. Some argue that the fermentation process adds to the taste. You aren't sure if that's wisdom or just a defense mechanism, but it's a popular belief. A cousin brings over a pot of duck confit, or at least the Egyptian version of it. It's duck meat cooked slowly in its own fat, sealed in a clay pot and stored underground. You pry the lid off, and a thick layer of white fat stares back. Underneath, tender meat, moist, rich. You blink in disbelief. You dip a crust of bread into the fat and taste. It's incredible, soft, salty, and deeply savory. For a moment, the world stops. But even this delicacy has its price. Fat goes rancid fast. If stored wrong, it smells like rot and failure. You remember that one neighbor who buried her fat pot too close to the latrine trench. That lesson was unforgettable. Back outside, you help stoke a slow fire under another smoker. This one's loaded with pigeon meat, dried herbs, and citrus peel. The smoke wafts upward in a slow, steady stream. It's mesmerizing, hypnotic. You think about how much time you spend not just cooking food, but fighting to keep it from turning against you. Preservation is a full-time job, and it's communal. No one can manage it all alone. You trade jars, share salt, swap tips, brag about last season's smoked goose like it's a rare art piece. By evening, your clothes smell like fire and salt. You scrape the soot from under your nails and lay out your own salted lentil paste to firm up overnight. You cover it with woven straw and hope the cats don't get curious. Dinner is simple. Sun-dried tomatoes, sour and chewy, last week's smoked fish, and a bit of rehydrated barley porridge. You add a dollop of fermented garlic paste for flair. It burns, but you smile anyway. You eat slowly, feeling the weight of the day in your bones, but also a strange satisfaction. This food will last. It will wait. It won't betray you tomorrow morning. As night falls, you close the clay lids on your storage jars, press them tight with cloth, and whisper a small prayer to whatever minor deity watches over ancient leftovers. Sleep comes with the scent of smoke in your hair and salt on your lips. Preservation may stink, but it's a kind of love. A rough, gritty, smelly kind of love. You've cooked over open flame before, but today the wind isn't playing nice. It howls down the village alleyways, kicking up sand and smoke in equal measure, and your eyes sting as you kneel beside your makeshift hearth. This is the daily dance. Your kitchen is a fire pit, your utensils are shards of clay and wood, and the temperature hovers somewhere between unpleasant and molten hellscape. Welcome to the ancient Egyptian kitchen, where everything wants to burn, break, or bite you. You shift the pot carefully, nudging it closer to the coals. It wobbles. Clay pots are delicate, prone to cracking if heated too fast or cooled too quick. One wrong move, and your dinner becomes pottery shrapnel. You learned that the hard way last month. The cooking tools at your disposal are few. A flat griddle stone, a dented ladle made of bronze stolen from a cousin's cousin, a couple of tongues carved from date palm branches, and your hands, forever nicked, burned, and stained with herbs you can't pronounce. You hear the telltale crack, and your shoulders sag. Another pot gone. The fire was too high. You scrape the contents into a leaf-lined bowl, lentil mush, slightly smoky. Not ruined, just extra rustic. Historians still debate whether most people had permanent indoor hearths or cooked communally outdoors. But in this heat, indoors is a sauna and outdoors is a barbecue. You choose sweat over suffocation. Your younger brother is grinding spices nearby, coriander, fenugreek, maybe some dried celery seed. The mortar is stone, the pestle wood. He grinds like he's mad at it. Maybe he is. Spices are rare here. Most are traded, hoarded, or borrowed with strong encouragement. But when you get them, they're magic. They cover the taste of sour meat. They elevate boiled barley from bland to bearable. They give your food personality. You toss a pinch into the stew and stir. The aroma shifts instantly. Sharp, bright. It almost makes up for the charcoal you just inhaled. The village children are baking flatbreads on heated clay tiles nearby. The dough puffs and hisses, dark blisters forming on its skin. Occasionally, one puffs too much and bursts like an overconfident frog. They laugh. You do too. You remember how your mother used to brush loaves with a mix of beer and honey before baking. You try that now, just a little. It caramelizes on contact, forming a crispy sheen that smells almost like dessert. Someone's boiling down dates behind you. Thick, bubbling syrup drips into a jar with a satisfying plop. You sneak a taste. It sticks to your fingers and teeth. You clean up with a reed brush and a bowl of water that's half sand by now. Your feet are burnt from standing barefoot near the fire, but shoes are a luxury and sandals melt if you get too close. You remind yourself not to do that again. Later, You help carry pots to the storage area, really just a shaded corner with shelves made from woven reeds and clay bricks. It's dusty, but cooler than anywhere else. You stack jars of lentils, salted vegetables, fermented mash, and smoked meats. Each pot has a lid made of linen, wax, or sometimes an upturned plate weighted with a rock. Ancient Tupperware. A cat watches you from the shadows, tail flicking. It's waiting for you to drop something. Anything. You remember the priest once said that fire was a gift from the gods. Controlled chaos. You nod, wiping sweat from your brow. Controlled might be generous, but yes, you get the point. Dinner is ready. You serve it up in chipped bowls. Lentil stew with a swirl of beer glaze, griddled bread, and a handful of pickled vegetables that you've somehow kept from turning blue. You eat in silence, flames casting flickering shadows on the walls. Your family eats with you. No one speaks, but everyone smiles at the taste of spice, the surprise of sweetness, the slight crunch of char. It's not a feast, but it's good. And somehow, in the mess and smoke and constant risk of burning your hands, you've made something that feeds not just the belly, but the spirit. You fall asleep still smelling like smoke, soot dusting your eyelashes. The ancient Egyptian kitchen might be a hazard zone, but it's also your kingdom. You wake up scratching. Again, this is nothing new. Insects are part of your diet whether you want them or not, and most days, you don't. You slap your arm and feel something squish. You don't look. Better not to know. Today's lesson in ancient Egyptian living? Bugs. In your food. Around your food. Sometimes being your food. You sit down to breakfast, leftover barley mash, hard bread, and some pickled radish. You pick a weevil out of your bread and flick it away without even flinching. It's routine now. You're not proud of it. You remember when you cared. When you'd stare in horror at a cooked beetle baked into a loaf like a forgotten raisin. Not anymore. You chew carefully. If it's crunchy and doesn't move, it's just part of the experience. Flour is stored in clay jars, sealed with linen, and tied tight with palm string. Doesn't matter. Weevils still get in. You once saw a whole colony hatch and swarm out like some kind of wheat demon. You didn't sleep well for a week. And flies? Constant. Buzzing, crawling, laying eggs in anything warm and soft, especially meat, especially anything sweet, especially everything. You cover jars with oiled cloth, hang baskets high above the ground, use smoke to drive them off. Still, they find you. Historians still debate just how bad the infestation problem was, but archaeological finds suggest insect remains in grain stores, ovens, even in the wrappings of mummified offerings. So yes, it was a thing. And cockroaches? Oh, the joy of finding one in your storage pot. Big, shiny, smug little monsters that scatter just when you get close. You once stepped on one in the dark. You still shiver at the sound. Someone in the village is boiling their lentils over extra hot coals today. Not for flavor, but to chase out the bugs. You copy them, holding your pot near the edge of the fire until the steam rises like a ghost. You also remember your uncle, who used to dry his flour in the sun to kill off insect eggs. He swore by it. Of course, it also attracted more insects while drying. He wasn't a genius. Later, while sorting through grain, you find a small pile of ant husks. You sigh. At least they're dead. You scoop them out with your hands and keep going. You sit down with a small child who's casually eating what appears to be a roasted locust. You raise an eyebrow. She grins. "It's crunchy," she says, offering you a leg. You politely decline. But honestly, it's protein. Locusts were actually eaten during times of famine. Roasted, dried, or ground into flour. It wasn't glamorous, but it was nutrition. There's even a strange recipe passed around, something like locust jam, made from pestle ground bugs, dates, and honey. You've never tried it. You're not brave enough. Yet. One of your neighbors swears by eating ants mixed into boiled fig mash. She says it strengthens the liver. You suspect it mostly strengthens her sense of denial. Later, you notice your storage basket wiggling. You lift the lid to find a worm in your lentils, looking smug. You scoop him out and toss him into the Nile. May he find peace and crocodiles. And it's not just in the food, it's around it, under it, buzzing above it. You eat faster, swatting as you go, because if you stop chewing, they'll land on your plate. You try placing a sprig of mint near your bowl. It helps for about 7 seconds. Then the flies get brave again. Still, some insects were considered sacred. Scarabs especially. You once saw a priest bless a bowl of lentils and place a carved beetle figurine beside it. Symbolic. Protective. oddly poetic. You finish your meal, one last crunch, probably a seed. Probably. You lie down at night, listening to the soft rustling of something crawling in the corner. You pull the linen tighter around you and try not to think about it. You'll deal with it tomorrow, like everything else. Because in Egypt, bugs aren't an infestation, they're housemates. You're up before dawn today, not because of hunger or bugs or the neighbor's rooster who sounds like he learned to crow from a goat, but because the Nile is rising. You can feel it in the air. It smells wetter, earthier, like silt and promise. You rush with the others toward the riverbank, sandals slapping the ground, heart racing. This isn't just morning excitement. This is everything. Because in ancient Egypt, flood season means the difference between eating and starving, between a granary full of grain or a stomach full of regret. You reach the Nile, and sure enough, it's swelling, creeping past its usual edge, water rippling over the flood markers carved into the stone steps. People cheer. Someone throws flower petals into the current. Historians still argue whether the exact measurement systems were standardized across nomes, but one thing is certain: everyone watched the Nile like it was a god. Because, well, it kind of was. The flood season was known as Akhet, and it wasn't just a natural event. It was sacred. People believed the god Hapi controlled the waters, and offerings were made regularly to keep him generous and gentle. You whisper a quick prayer yourself as you squat near the embankment, watching the water swirl past. Back in the village, preparations are underway. Farmers prepare to plant as soon as the water recedes. Scribes adjust their wax tablets. Priests hold quiet ceremonies. Children get ready for a long month of soggy feet and mud-stained tunics. And you're calculating food. Because here's the truth no one says too loud. If this year's flood is too low, you die. If it's too high, you also die. Too low, and the crops won't grow. The grain shrivels. The storage jars echo. You chew dry papyrus, hoping for flavor. Too high, and the flood wipes out homes, fields, granaries, lives. No planting. Just rebuilding. Today's flood looks good. Not perfect, but promising. You feel a quiet, cautious hope settle in your chest like a warm stone. You head back home where your family is counting their grain stores. You've got enough barley for maybe 2 months, emmer for 1. If all goes well, you'll make it through the hungry gap. If not, you start mixing bark and bitterness into your dough by midwinter. Someone brings up famine bread, made from ground acacia pods, tree roots, and whatever edible green you can boil without vomiting. It binds, it fills, it tastes like despair. You help bury jars of dried goods higher on the hill, just in case. It's standard flood insurance. You've seen entire houses swallowed by rising water before. Later, you help carry offerings to the local temple. A basket of onions, a handful of dried figs, a small jug of sour beer. A silent plea to Happy, please don't get dramatic this year. The priest accepts it with a nod. His eyes flick to the sky. We shall see, he says, which is never comforting. Still, you do what you can. You help dig channels to guide the water toward the fields. You stack sandbags near the granary. You tell your siblings not to swim too far. They laugh, but you remember last year's crocodile. And while all of this goes on, the anxiety grows quieter. Because planning helps, movement helps. Action is survival. Dinner that night is humble. Barley flatbread, dried fish, and pickled lentils. But it tastes a little brighter. Maybe it's the fresh river air. Maybe it's that maybe this year will be okay. You sit on the roof as the sky turns pink, watching the Nile glitter in the distance. The flood reflects the last of the sun like it's made of liquid bronze. You remember your grandmother's words. The Nile doesn't feed us. The Nile teaches us to wait. And tonight, you fall asleep to the soft roar of the rising river. Not with fear, but with faith. You sit on a flat rock near the granary, chewing on a piece of hardened bread, when your neighbor says something strange. Food isn't for eating, she mutters, staring into a jar of beer like it just insulted her lineage. It's for meaning. You pause mid-chew. That tracks. In ancient Egypt, food has always been more than just fuel. It's ritual, it's magic, it's social standing. It's a conversation with the gods, wrapped in onions, soaked in beer, and baked into sacred loaves. Today, you're helping prepare food for a festival. Not because you're hungry, but because the gods are. The temple kitchen is buzzing, not with efficiency, with reverence. Every onion peeled is peeled with prayer. Every loaf kneaded with intention. You walk in carrying a tray of dates, already sticky from the morning heat. You place them beside a bowl of lentil mash, shaped like an ankh, dusted with ground coriander. This isn't lunch, it's an offering. Historians still debate how literally Egyptians took these rituals. Did they believe the gods consumed the essence of the food, or was it symbolic? A kind of divine potluck in which the act mattered more than the result. Either way, you're not taking chances. You help arrange goose fat in spirals on a platter, top it with preserved fig halves, and place it beneath a painted shrine. And then you wait. Later, the priests will come, chant, bless, and burn incense. The food might be taken to the back, shared among temple staff, or buried, or left in the sun until flies carry it to heaven. No one really talks about what happens after. You step outside into the blinding light, wiping sweat from your brow with a corner of your tunic. Back home, your sister is making bread, but not the kind you eat. This one is shaped like a boat, for a funerary rite. She adds milk to the flour, sprinkles it with crushed lotus petals, and presses a stamp into the top, an eye of Horus. Protection, guidance, sacred carbs. You think back to last week when you were sick, and someone brought you garlic tied in linen. Not to eat, to wear. It was a charm against rotting spirits. It didn't work. You were still sick, but you felt better. Food is protection. Food is spell. Your cousin's wedding featured bread shaped like birds, cheese molded like suns, and honey poured over everything like a blessing. No one left hungry. No one left unmarried. Even childbirth has food magic. Poppy seed paste to calm the womb, hot beer for pain, date syrup for strength. And death? Oh, death has its menu. Grave goods often include loaves, dried meats, and onions wrapped in linen, not for the body, for the ka, the spirit, so it can eat its way through the afterlife like a very dignified tourist. You help gather wild herbs in the afternoon, bitter ones, not for flavor, for cleansing. Someone in the village has had bad dreams. They believe a spirit has lingered. So you boil the herbs, pour them over the threshold, and leave bread outside, just in case. Even farming isn't just farming. You sing to the wheat, you bless the barley, you mutter to the onions when they sprout crooked. It's not superstition. It's tradition. It's also your survival strategy. If the gods are watching, you want them to see you doing things right. You recall a story told by your grandfather about a man who insulted the gods by skipping his beer offering. His harvest failed. His cow miscarried. His wife ran off with a brewer. Coincidence? Maybe. But again, you don't take chances. Dinner that night is ritualistic, even though it's simple. You break bread and share it in silence. You pour a small cup of beer onto the ground for the forgotten spirits. You whisper thanks to the sky before the first bite. No one told you to. You just do. Because in Egypt, food isn't just food. It's prayer, it's protection, it's presence. And as the stars rise above you, your belly full of sacred calories, you feel, just for a moment, that your gods are near. Listening, watching, maybe even full. The graveyard lies just beyond the last row of mud brick houses, where the land rises slightly, dry and cracked under the desert sun. You've been here before, but not for mourning. You're here for the food. Not to take it, of course. That would be very bad luck. No. Today you're helping with the burial banquet of a nobleman. And this one's big. The whole village is buzzing. The air smells like roasting duck, honeyed bread, and spiced lentils. It smells like a festival. But the man being honored isn't here to taste it. His body is already wrapped in linen, placed inside a carved wooden coffin, and perfumed with so much myrrh that the air feels thicker. He's surrounded by jars, loaves, dried meats, fruits wrapped in leaves, cheese sealed in beeswax. You know this food won't be eaten. Not by the living, anyway. It's destined for the tomb. You help arrange a platter of beef ribs crusted in coriander and salt. You tuck lotus petals between the cuts. Not because it changes the taste, because it pleases the ka, the soul that needs feeding in the next world. Historians often marvel at the quantity of food found in tombs. Full meals, detailed clay models of slaughterhouses, bakeries, and breweries. Enough food, some say, to support a small banquet in the afterlife every night for eternity. You remember once sneaking into a partially collapsed tomb as a child. There were still jars inside, dusty, sealed, and heavy with the smell of old vinegar and sour grain. You didn't open them. You were too afraid. Back at today's burial, the priest is blessing the food. He raises a cup of beer, murmurs a hymn to Osiris, and pours it gently onto the earth. The crowd follows, lifting their own bowls and pouring just a sip into the sand. Then comes the false door offering. A slab carved with the likeness of the deceased is leaned against the tomb wall. It's a spiritual doorway. The food is arranged in front of it. Bread, onions, dried fish, fig paste. You arrange a honey cake shaped like a heart. Next to it, a split pomegranate. You dust the offerings with cinnamon. No one touches the food. Not yet. Not until the priest has finished the rites. Some of this will stay. Some will be eaten in a quiet gathering after. Some will be buried with the body. The rest may be taken by temple workers. Nothing is wasted, but nothing is eaten without permission either. Later, you sit beneath an acacia tree, a bowl of festival stew in your hands. It's richer than usual. Someone used animal fat, not just water. You recognize the flavor and feel your stomach sing. Children run past with honey-glazed dates. They squeal, sticky and grinning. You used to do that too. A woman shares a basket of fresh bread stamped with symbols. Not for magic, just for tradition. Spirals, eyes, reeds, each loaf a blessing. One of the elders shares a story of a pharaoh who demanded his tomb contain 300 loaves, one for each day of the journey through the underworld. By day 4, he probably regretted not packing fruit. You laugh, then go quiet. Because even in the light, even with the food, there's reverence here. A sense that something holy is happening beneath all the flavor. Food isn't just for now, it's for after. You walk slowly through the offering rows one more time before the tomb is sealed. You see dried fish tied in papyrus string, a jar of pickled leeks, bread shaped like tiny pyramids, and near the foot of the coffin a bowl of lentils, steamed, spiced, with a piece of roasted garlic tucked on top. You wonder, do the dead still crave taste? Or is it memory that feeds them? The lid of the tomb slides shut. The food is left behind, and the living move forward. You carry a slice of honey cake home, not as theft, but as a reminder. That food in this world always means more than it seems, even when no one's left to taste it. The sun blazes high as you sit outside your home, chewing slowly on a hunk of yesterday's bread, its edge so tough it might double as a tool. You're tired, not just from the heat or the labor, but from the sheer repetition of it all. Bread, beer, onions, dried fish, chew, swallow, repeat. And yet deep down a strange realization bubbles up as you look over the basket of your weekly food allotment. It could be worse. You've heard stories, from travelers, from elders, from dusty papyrus scraps tucked inside the temple, about Mesopotamia. Over there, they eat stews so thick with grit they're practically paste. Their beer is even chunkier than yours. And the flatlands? Flood too often or not at all. Salty soil, bitter vegetables, and no Nile to save them. You bite into your bread again. It's terrible, but it's predictably terrible. That matters. And here's the twist. While you've spent your life dodging bugs, chewing sand, and fermenting things with crossed fingers, somehow, Egypt has thrived. You walk past the granary. It's humming with life. The scribes are arguing over quota marks, children are chasing each other with burnt crusts of bread, and someone's already offering a barter of dried goat meat for fig syrup. You pass a neighbor spreading lentil mash into clay molds. Why, you ask. She shrugs. It cools faster that way. Practical. Improvised. Oddly genius. The people here have turned food into a system, a culture, a survival craft. You duck under a fig tree, pluck one of the lower fruits, and take a cautious bite. Sweet, soft, almost luxurious. You smile, you chew, and you remember that Egypt's food, for all its faults, has structure. It has rhythm. Flood, sow, harvest, grind, bake, chew, pray, preserve, eat, start again. Your friend in the next village once claimed his stew was so salty it preserved itself on the spoon. You believe him. You've tasted his cooking. You walk through the market, listening to vendors shout about dried cucumbers, fermented melon, and barley cakes with less than usual grit. You see a priest blessing a pile of onions with incense smoke, a girl carrying bread balanced perfectly on her head, a boy drinking beer out of a cracked bowl like it's sacred, which it kind of is. You sit by the temple pond, chewing a pickled date and watching the reflection of the papyrus sway. It hits you. This isn't a story of suffering, it's a story of adaptation. Egypt has taken its challenges, the heat, the floods, the insects, the rot, and made meals anyway. Not gourmet, not glamorous, but meaningful. Your food keeps you alive, keeps your gods happy. keeps your community turning in time with the Nile. And sure, sometimes you chew a beetle, or get weevil in your flour, or have to convince yourself that the meat hasn't quite gone off. But you eat, and you know what you eat, where it comes from, who touched it, who grew it, who whispered a prayer over it before it was buried in a tomb or set on your dinner stone. That's more than many can say. As night falls, you sit by your fire with a bowl of barley soup. You sip it slowly, savoring each bland, smoky, slightly chewy mouthful. You know it's not fancy, but it's yours. And tomorrow? You'll rise with the sun. You'll grind the grain. You'll boil, bake, dry, preserve. Because in this land of dust and gods, you've learned how to make even the worst food mean something. And that's not nothing. So now, let your hands relax. You've worked hard. You've chopped and ground and stirred over open flame. You've chased off flies, watched the river rise, counted jars and grains and gods. You've seen what it means to survive. Not with plenty, but with pattern. With purpose. The night settles soft around you, draping its cool hands across your neck and shoulders. The last of the bread is tucked away, the jars sealed, the hearth dimming into gentle ember light. Your body knows the rhythm. Eat, sleep, rise, pray, cook, chew, repeat. But tonight you rest. Let your breath slow. Let your fingers unfurl. No grinding stones, no splintered reeds, just stillness. The Nile murmurs somewhere beyond the edge of the village, a lullaby wrapped in water and moonlight. The cows have gone quiet. Even the flies have stopped buzzing just for now. You curl into the mat, muscles humming from the day, but your heart quiet. You are fed, and tomorrow will come. But tonight, you're warm, you're full, you're safe. And somewhere, beneath the sand and stars and silt, the gods are full too. Sweet dreams, little baker of barley.